Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everyone. Quite a busy week this week, Bill.
And we're taping on Wednesday. We're going before the Hillary Benghazi testimony.
Yeah.
So we couldn't wait until Friday to dissect that. But we're not even at the pinnacle of the political week.
No, and who knows? We sometimes we tape on Wednesday, sometimes we tape on Thursday, occasionally we tape on Friday. We try to time this as best we can, not just for our own schedules, but to coincide with news. And sometimes it happened a couple weeks ago where we did a show completely ill-timed. I think John Boehner, Boehner dropped out,
right.
or said that he was going to, resign his speakership. I think it was like right after we taped, or the day after we taped, or something.
And we missed the Kevin McCarthy announcement too. Too many.
Maybe that's the one.
Too many.
Yeah, that might be the one I'm actually. Yeah, but here we are, and that's why you guys tune in, is just because it's consistently quality content. Where do we want to start this week, Bill?
Well, I want to start with Canada, but we should probably save the best for last. Maybe we should start with Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan's big announcement last night that he will run for speaker if you give me everything that I want and you get nothing that you want. I'm a little dubious how, I saw some instant Twitter reaction like, wow, Paul Ryan really boxed in the Freedom Caucus. I'm like, well, how did he box in the Freedom Caucus? Why can't the Freedom Caucus tell him to screw off and not relent to any of his demands?
I don't know. I think he might have boxed him in a little bit. I mean, look, it's possible that if they don't cooperate with Ryan, that they will turn off. There's 40 of them, and they sort of, to a certain extent, have power regardless of whether or not they're hated. But there are other people. There's probably another 50 Republicans in the House who are influenced by the Freedom Caucus. And at some point, if they contribute to the chaos more, if they don't get behind Ryan, they could potentially be ostracized even more by the sort of mainstream conservatives in the House. On the other hand, if the Freedom Caucus does endorse Ryan, then they could potentially turn off some of their hardline supporters, talk radio, for example. And then Ryan can say, look, you guys said you guys supported me, so you got to, we're going to play ball now. I mean, anyway,
the Freedom Caucus's whole thing is, you might understand the specifics better than I do, but they propose a series of rules changes that would weaken the speaker and give their caucus more power over the business of the House. That's what they want. And Ryan comes in and says, I'm not going to give you any of those things, but I want a rules change. So you no longer can submit a motion to vacate the speakership, which was the threat, which is what you used to oust the speaker. Basically, you can't oust the speaker, or at least whatever, or maybe it's because of a newfangled process that would make it a lot more complicated. And you already have one of the Freedom Caucus guys saying, how is giving Ryan more power solving the problem of Boehner having too much power? These 40 guys are people who are already ostracized and do not care that they're ostracized. They want to cause chaos. That's their whole reason of being right now. So I don't see how Ryan making a big splashy announcement prevents them from creating more chaos. They still hold all the cards here so long as Republicans allow them to hold the cards. And the only way you cut those guys out of the deal is you tell them to screw off. You don't get to dictate this, and we're going to have the speakership done jointly with Democratic votes. And that's the only way we're going to keep the government open and raise the debt limit. And we don't care what you guys have to say about it. That's the only other option in my mind. Maybe this is, maybe I am being a bit histrionic. And Ryan can.
Well, I guess.
Go on,
if Ryan becomes speaker with the endorsement of sort of all the different conferences, including the Freedom Conference, then I think he would be in a position to say, like, hey, guys, you endorsed me, you were on board with this, and now if you're going to try to cut my legs out from under me now, I don't want to do this. I have to be forced to get votes from Democrats. So I think that he has to get the speakership. There has to be a consensus, a large consensus for, in other words, I think Ryan's doing the right thing. having the speakership isn't worth a warm bucket of spit unless you have the power that the speakership ought to have. And the only way he can have that power is if he gets everyone initially to buy in on the record. And that's why I think he was smart to do this publicly. I know some people have criticized him and said he should have gone privately and had this. No, I think you need this part to be on the record so that it's very public. And if the Freedom Caucus endorses him, then I think that gives him leverage if they later backtrack, where he can say, he'll have the moral high ground and say, hey, you guys are flip-flopping on this. Why did you support me if you weren't going to support me?
I get that if the Freedom Caucus totally caves to Paul Ryan wins and has more power. But I just don't see why they would cave. What is the incentive to not just make him speaker, but to make it impossible to remove him from speaker if he keeps the government open, doesn't defund Planned Parenthood? The only
incentive would be if you believe, as is true, he's the most conservative person you could get as speaker, and B, that there's going to be chaos and you're going to be stuck with Boehner indefinitely, and C, you could be blamed by other conservatives who might otherwise be predisposed to support you. Now, look, I don't know that they're strategic in their thinking or that they can be lobbied. And you may be right, but what does Ryan have to lose? He doesn't want to be speaker anyway. I mean, I've done this when I've had job offers. I was happy at another job. I didn't want to leave. You say, okay, well, great. Well, I'm not working weekends. Probably not going to come in on Fridays. And, you make him an offer that they can refuse. And I think that Ryan benefits from the fact that he doesn't need this gig, and it has to be perfect for him to be willing to take it. I think that's a strength for him. He's got nothing to lose. Why not make this offer and see if they reject it?
I agree that Ryan personally has nothing to lose. If he makes this play and the Freedom Caucus says no, and Ryan says, fine, I'm still Ways and Means Committee chair, and I'm going to do my tax reform, and that's it. I get that. But the party has this massive problem where these 40 guys are making them look like jokes to the rest of the country. And Boehner and McCarthy have already failed to grasp that they need to be kicked out to the degree that you can. Obviously, they can't be removed from Congress. But they need to be stood up to and removed from the political process of organizing the House, which can only be done with the help of Democrats. And obviously, they are extremely loath to take that step. But I don't see what Ryan this is the last chance to not have to take that step. But if this doesn't work, there's really no other avenue but to have a bipartisan speaker. And my sense is by Ryan taking this step, that and it fails, you're adding to the image of an incompetently, fundamentally fractured and amateurish party that can't be trusted to govern.
The interesting thing, and I have a piece at the Daily Caller up about, it's mostly about Donald Trump, actually, but this fits perfectly. It's about how culture is more important than politics, and we've had things in our culture over the course of since Watergate, at least, if not World War II. You've had, the decline of we no longer respect our elders or value their experience as much. We now have the celebritization of politics. We no longer revere institutions. You can talk about marriage. You can talk about the church. You can talk about the media. We distrust them. We don't respect them. We don't trust them. You used to work at a job for 40 years and get a gold watch. They're not loyal to us anymore. We're not as loyal to them as we used to be. And political parties being the same way. They used to have not just statutory power, but a lot of loyalty that people had to them. Stick with a political party for the rest of your life. Even if you're an ultra-conservative Democrat, you might still stay registered as a Democrat because grandma was a Democrat. And those days are changing. And I think some of this is happening, this interesting phenomenon whereby the Republican Party, the conservative party, has someone like Donald Trump who's more of a radical, really. And what you're seeing in the House right now is actually quite radical, right? They're moving away from the traditional institutions, the parties, the speakership. Not to say that the speakership is that all the rules of the House or Senate are handed down on high, per se. But these are longstanding traditions that conservatives tend traditionally to observe and to respect and to not want to mess around with too much. And what you're doing is sort of eroding the power of the speakership potentially if the Freedom Caucus gets their way, and really adding to this larger phenomenon, which is direct democracy, something the founders really, did not like. I mean, and this is just sort of the lowering of institutions, as far as I can tell.
I mean, we always have debates over, strong executive and weak executive, too much consolidation power at the top, more direct democracy at the bottom, blah, blah, blah. But really all it comes down to what results you want. These guys would not care that the speaker was strong if the speaker was doing the things that they wanted the speaker to do. I mean, the fact is there is a small minority of Congress. I had a piece at Real Clear Politics about this, saying the things that I was saying before. I mean, going as far as, this is a cancer on the party, and by failing to remove the cancer, it's like refusing chemotherapy because it'd be unpleasant. You have to go through that treatment if you want to get rid of the cancer. And I got all these comments at Real Clear Politics saying, the Freedom Caucus represents the people. Why do you and you liberals don't want to hear the people? I'm like, these guys are not the people. They are 40 people who represent an eighth of Congress, or then a tenth of Congress. And just because they utter something does not make them the de facto voice of all of America, because the speaker didn't do exactly what they wanted to do tactically at every waking moment. So we need to have a speaker who can make the House function is not having a royalist government. It is one body. It is one half of one branch of government trying to be able to make the government function. And you have a bunch of people now who manifestly do not want the government to function, which is exactly what the founders did. The founders created the Constitution because the Articles of Confederation were not working and we're not having a functioning government, and they wanted more centralization so it would work. And so these guys are the anti-federalists of the modern day.
Yeah. It's an interesting turn of events. So anyway, we'll keep an eye on that. I mean, do you have any predictions on this? It sounds like, Bill, you think that they will not accede to Ryan's request.
Not
demands.
I'm not a mind reader. Maybe Ryan's got a mind melt thing going on. But just from what I'm reading today from the Freedom Caucus guys, it would tell me that this is going to be a bust, and you're going to be back at square one. They're going to have a bipartisan speaker at the end of the day.
Well, do you think it's possible? Do you think it's possible that Boehner either just doesn't ever leave?
I think it's totally possible. I think it's totally possible that there's just
or that somebody who does accede to the demands of the Freedom Caucus, who's willing to take a weakened speakership, would instead emerge and get their support, but also get to 218. That's the interesting thing. Is it plausible that anybody could win 218 with the support, or at least not the opposition, of the Freedom Caucus?
If the debt limit and the long-term budget agreement and the transportation bill and the export-import bank, if they all got taken care of by October 30th, I could see that, because then whoever that next speaker is getting 218 doesn't have to do anything. That would be controversial for the next year and a half. But we are already on October 21st, and none of that stuff is done. I assume they're going to get the debt limit done by November 3rd. But all those other things are still hanging out there that the next speaker is probably going to have to deal with. And no speaker is going to walk into that knowing, hey, the things that I have to do to make the government function, these guys are not going to let me do it. I'm going to have a motion to vacate, in a matter of weeks. I'm seeing a tweet here. Chad Pergram. He's great. He's Fox News congressional reporter.
He tweets. It's from about 10 minutes ago. Jordan says House Freedom Caucus is to meet with Ryan this afternoon. Jordan says they are, quote, open to Ryan. Jim Antle, who is great on Twitter, by the way, he's sort of like in the Dave Weigel school of humorous tweets, takes that and says, as in open borders. Am I right? which speaks to really the defining issue, right? It's am I right? It's immigration reform. If you've ever been for immigration reform, I see Laura Ingraham on Fox News panel and talk about a one-trick pony. She's obviously smart, but literally, like, all she can talk about the last 5 years is about how immigration and trade deals are hurting the middle class. Now, she's very passionate about it, but it's funny how people, there are certain people, a handful of people, who just have become obsessed with that. That is the only thing that they are capable of talking about. Like, every blog post is about that issue. Every appearance, no matter what the question is, it comes back to that. And I just don't know. The Freedom Caucus may be open to Ryan, but does the fact that he supports immigration reform, which they call amnesty, now we know that there are differences. You know, the Senate bill, for example, and I hate to beat a dead horse, I'm sure we've talked about it a million times here, but the Senate bill, I think, required people who, number one, had a clean, other than being illegal immigrants, and there I said it, not undocumented, other than that, had a clean record, who were willing to, like, pay a fine, pay a penalty or back taxes, whatever, and then wait like a decade to a dozen years to have a chance to possibly become a citizen. That's not amnesty. I mean, you may not like it, and you may not like anybody, them having a chance for citizenship or even a legal status, but it's not by definition amnesty. But anyway, enough about that. Is that a deal breaker? Is that a deal breaker for Ryan?
Well, I think the immigration issue clearly is under the surface. Paul Ryan is pro-immigration reform. People might not know that. And I think the hard right is suspicious of Ryan on those grounds. But they don't have to deal with immigration over the next year. They have to keep the government open. They have to raise the debt limit. They have to have a transportation bill or road projects will idle. They have to do export-import bank, or else more exporter jobs are going to get lost in certain districts and states, and that's going to make Congress real twitchy. There are some hard deadline things they have to do, and immigration is not one of them. So I think that is a motivating factor for the Freedom Caucus to thwart Ryan. But I don't think it would be the deal breaker. I think the other things are the bigger issue. And just to get back to what you're saying about Boehner, Boehner is in the position until he's not. Boehner doesn't have to step down October 30th just because he said he would. So if we're still in a position of chaos, he can hang around for as long as he wants, so long as there isn't a motion to vacate the speakership, which hasn't been put to the floor yet. So there was a threat from one of the Freedom Caucus guys that if, let's say Boehner at the end of the month, very likely, passes a debt limit increase with largely Democratic votes, and the speakership issue is not resolved yet, then the Freedom Caucus could force the motion to vacate vote, and Boehner would probably survive with Democratic votes, and then you would de facto have the bipartisan speakership, which I was previously talking about. So I think that is a scenario here. And the way they're going, it's possibly the most probable scenario.
Yes. Interesting. And by the way, I recently had on my Matt Lewis and the News podcast, Mort Kondracki, who is co-author with Fred Barnes of a new book about Jack Kemp, Bleeding Heart Conservative. Of course, Paul Ryan is an acolyte, a former protege of Jack Kemp. And really what we're seeing right now is a fight over the direction of conservatism. It goes to my book, Too Dumb to Fail. Pre-order that. There's a fight. And are we going to go the direction of Jack Kemp, Paul Ryan, I would say Ronald Reagan? Some may disagree. Or are we going to go the direction of the Freedom Caucus and Donald Trump, a more populist, nativist, whatever brand of conservatism? Both are strains that have a long track record, especially it depends on how you look at it. I would argue that the Kemp Ryan thing certainly goes to Hayek and Burke and maybe Aristotle, but you can't deny that there's a long history of the populist strain as well. And Craig Shirley, who is a Reagan author and biographer, he's coming on my podcast tomorrow. argues that Trump is the heir to Ronald Reagan's legacy. So we're fighting over the legacy of Reagan. We're fighting over the direction of the conservative party, conservative movement, and it's painful. But in a way, where else would you rather be than right here, right now? I mean, this is a big moment happening, and it depends what direction we want to go as a party, as a movement.
Did you give Morton Kondracki a big John McLaughlin group more tone, or did you leave that aside? I was tempted to be like, Jack Tremont, wrong. For the younger kids in the audience, you might not remember the McLaughlin group's still in the air, just nobody watches it anymore.
It's still on.
That is the best SNL. The two best SNL sketches ever is McLaughlin group sketch and then the subsequent Sinatra group sketch. Those are by far are the best. But you had to be old enough to have watched the show, perhaps to get all the jokes there.
That's the problem with half of my references is that they're is that they're too old. By the way, as we're taping this, it is Back to the Future Day, which I guess is the day they set for Back to the Future 2.
Right.
Is that right?
This is Back to the Future 2 Day, October 21st, 2015.
So that part doesn't blow me away. I mean, I don't care that we don't have hoverboards or whatever. But I will say, this is not an original observation, but I find it disturbing. It's a different observation, which is that more time. Okay, I went to see Back to the Future, the original Back to the Future, in 1985, and in 1985, to me, it felt like modern times, and it still does, which maybe that tells you how old I am. But 1955 seemed so weird and different and ancient, like the olden days. Like when my kids ask me about when I was a little kid in the old day, like as if we were riding on stagecoaches. Like 1955 seemed absurdly like naive and just lame. Mr. Sandman. I mean, come on, Mr. Sandman. So that. But the crazy thing is that as much time has expired since 1985 to today as had expired from 1985 to 1955. And Chuck Klosterman in one of his books makes this point, which I think is illustrative of things. So when Marty McFly plays Johnny Be Good, he says, this is an oldie but a goodie. Johnny Be Good ends up coming out in 1957, I think. In 1985, it made a lot of sense to call Johnny Be Good an oldie but a goodie. Would you, Bill Scher, refer to a song that came out in 1985, let's say The Power of Love by Huey Lewis, would you refer to that as an oldie?
Well, I think if I was listening to the radio these days, that song would get played on classic rock Thursdays, I'm sure. I might not call it an oldie but goodie, but I think stuff from the 80s is getting called classic now, the way things from the 60s was called classic when we were kids. And I'm starting to see nostalgia pieces about the 90s, which is stuff that, I was, an adult in the 90s. So that's sort of, weird for me as an old man.
I haven't looked at the video yet, but Rubio put out some sort of a Back to the Future video that has clips of Hillary Rodham Clinton circa 1992 in it. So we'll see how that shakes out.
And I feel like, to the extent we're going to bring us back into politics, it's too superficial just to deride something based on age. I mean, Obama gave McCain a good elbow with age as a subtext, but without a touch as the frame. So it's not just that he is a certain age; it's that he's not connected to the problems of today. And I think Rubio's trying to play that same kind of card with Hillary, and I don't think it has the same kind of potency. Because, the way she talks about issues today doesn't seem all that different from the way a politician who's 20 years younger talks about those issues, if you're a Democrat. Talking about Huey Lewis as being an oldie but goodie, it doesn't feel that old. Because there are a lot, Taylor Swift just put out an album called 1989 that's supposed to feel like an 80s album. And you can kind of...
By the way, have you heard the Ryan Adams version?
I have, and I've never been a big Ryan Adams fan, and that has confirmed it for me. I found it.
Bill,
Totally flat and uninspired.
I liked it, but I do like Ryan Adams. In fact, I saw him back in it was 2008 maybe at Constitution Hall. Anyway,
my Taylor Swift point is that album doesn't sound like an antique. It doesn't sound like she did like a doo-wop record because the music hasn't traveled that far in the past 30 years.
Well, the difference, of course, is that the 1960s were a transformative generation or decade, and you can see it. You watch some Adam Carolla talks about every once in a while. Like you look at an episode from like the first season of the Brady Bunch, and look at how their hairdos are and how they're dressed, and then look at season 3, and look at their hairdos and how they're dressed, and it's like 50 years had passed in the course of 3 or 4 years. And so I think that as much as things have changed in my lifetime and the advent of, iPhones and whatnot, and the internet even, in terms of culturally speaking, we're not that much different from the mid-'80s, as opposed to you go from 1960, what the world was like, to 1968, what the world was like, music, fashion, politics. It felt like many, many, many years.
Now, speaking of age in politics, Jim Webb dropped out of the Democratic race, and I thought, and here's something like other people have commented this. I think you may put this on your Twitter feed. I mean, here's a guy who, if he ran, 10 years ago, might easily be a front runner in the Democratic Party. In the age of Bush, there was this, there was a strain of thought that we need to have another Southern moderate type Democrat to go up against, the Bush-Reagan era. We can't win on this terrain with a traditional Democratic liberal. He's a former Republican. He's a military man. He can't be skewered as culturally effete in any way, shape, or form. When he won the Senate race in 2006, he was lauded as a breakthrough for Democrats. And now on the stage, he is a total afterthought because he's saying lots of things that are really out of step with the current tenor of the Democratic Party on affirmative action, on Iran, being kind of tortured about the Confederate flag. And now I said after that debate, I think people are being a little bit too dismissive about his next step, because I said after the debate, he might get the biggest bump out of the debate because there are some conservative Democrats left in the world, not a lot. I'm not saying the party hasn't shifted leftward. I think that it has, but particularly in West Virginia or Kentucky or Tennessee or Louisiana, where a conservative Democrat might win the governor's race in a matter of weeks. These are people who might vote Democrat for local races, but vote Republican in national races, and they might say, hey, this guy Jim Webb exists, so maybe when the pollster calls, I will now say that I support him, and I'll go from 0 to 5. Now, in fact, he actually went from 0 to 2 in the CNN poll. When you take Biden out of the race, he was polling at 2%, and ahead of all the other also ran. So, bumps are, it's all a relative term, but it's something. And so I see all these headlines now that Jim Webb barely running for president, now not running for president. Maybe he'll barely run for president again as an independent. But look, if he's running as a third party, which he teased that he might do, I wouldn't say he's going to get to Ross Perot at 20% levels. But there is a constituency of conservative, populist, economically populist, socially conservative Democrats, particularly in red states, where if they are particularly unenamored with the Republican nominee, maybe the Republican nominee is not seen as, maybe it's not a close race. Maybe Hillary's up by 5 points in the polls come October 2016. Webb might be a very safe person to vote for, and that might make it possible for Hillary to win a state like West Virginia or Arkansas or Tennessee or Kentucky. I don't think it would tip the race. It might magnify a victory if she was already pointing in that direction. So I don't think Webb is going to go out quietly here. I think it's very possible he becomes a factor, and people pay attention to.
If Jim Webb runs as an independent, and my choice is between Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton for president, where do I go? Let me say this too, Bill. I have a tradition which I try to adhere to. I don't always succeed. Sometimes we do adhere. Sometimes I write a column. Sometimes we have just talk about it here. But every year, Tim Carney started this from the Washington Examiner. I go through and I talk about all the things. I try to rack my brain to remember all the many things I got wrong during the year of prognosticating. One of the things I got really right, and look, I make no pretense of being an expert on the left. I've spent the last several years writing a book about the conservative movement. Clearly, I'm much more interested in it and much more vested interest in it and much more experience in it. But Dave Weigel, when Jim Webb got into the race, I wrote a post for theweek.com where I said, watch out for Jim Webb. It's possible he could catch on and give Hillary a run for her money in Iowa or something. And I was, of course, incredibly wrong. And Dave Weigel mocked me. I forget where he was then, probably at Slate or something. But anyway, he mocked me for that. And I think I was absolutely wrong. It was a misreading of the modern Democratic Party, which being a socialist is perfectly fine. But being a Vietnam War
socialist now.
Being a war hero apparently is not as big of a plus. So anyway, the point here being, I do think that Webb. There was a time when Jim Webb would have made for a pretty good Democratic candidate, but in the post-Obama era, the party has left him.
Well, I think it's one of the reasons why, Bernie is doing as well as he is, and Hillary has been a little careful about how far she pushes her pragmatist argument. She's pushing it. But Obama, opened up the window of the possible. Before, between, Carter and Obama, when the only Democrat who won the White House was Clinton, there was a sense that we're playing on conservative turf, and we really can't have a loud and proud liberal be a nominee. That's not politically tenable. And, even those on the left who think Obama is insufficiently liberal, he definitely changes the perception of what is possible to be a successful nominee. Now,
I remember, Rush, I totally agree. I remember Rush Limbaugh used to play these feminazi updates, and there was, we're feminists and we're in your face. And Rush, that was like one of the sound bites that Rush would play. And Rush would always say, it's good when liberals think they're winning because they say and do crazy things. He would say, we shouldn't get rid of all the liberals. We need to keep one or two of them around on a college campus somewhere like this, sort of as a museum piece to remind people, And for a long time, I could take solace when liberals would go on TV and say something crazy. I would be like, go ahead, please say more of that leftist Trotskyite pablum because you're losing voters all over the country when you're saying this. And, of course, then we got Barack Obama, and now we have Bernie Sanders getting tens of thousands of people to show up at rallies. So, I mean, the culture in America has changed. It has certainly shifted.
This is why conservatives might be a little more nervous about Bernie. I mean, Bernie is not promoting Leninism or Stalinism. He's not out there talking about nationalizing all of our industries. I think he is it is probably unnecessary to win the White House by having a big conversation about what's the proper definition of small d democratic socialism, but that's what Bernie wants to do. He's going to do a big speech defining on his terms in short order, apparently. And what he's going to put out there, I don't think it would be sellable in a general election today. Maybe not ever, but it's not scary. It's not robbing you of all your freedoms. It's saying let's have free college and free universal childcare and things like that. So there's definitely I think Bernie is being more successful at the Overton window game than the Republicans are being right now. I don't think the Republican debate process is making far right positions seem relatively more moderate by the way that race is going right now, especially with the House stuff as a backdrop to boot. Whereas Hillary can now be for tuition-free college without batting an eye.
Right.
Because Bernie's out there talking about a totally free college. He's not making these things toxic.
No, that's a valid point, but I would say much more important than that is the fact that that Obama got elected twice, and that the country has shifted leftward on a variety of issues. Now, sometimes the pendulum swings back, but for now, I mean, I think the bigger thing is that the fact that Bernie could succeed and create that Overton window wouldn't have even happened in the past.
I should say debt-free, cover Hillary's position, not tuition-free. My misspeak there. The other big factor in the Democratic race this week, and it's a moving target, so apologize if we're behind the curve by the time this gets posted. But Joe Biden, more weird speculation, more odd cryptic comments. We had a congressman's tweet on Monday that I hear from a very good source that he's going to run. We heard stuff on Sunday and Monday that was going to be announced within 48 hours, and that clearly has not happened yet. But he did this day of events with Walter Mondale as a day of celebration in Washington for Walter Mondale and his vice presidential legacy. And Biden, as a fellow VP, was chaperoning him for all that. And he revised the story of the Osama bin Laden raid, saying that he did tell the president that he should take the shot when he previously had said that he told Obama no. He made a comment about how we shouldn't treat Republicans like the enemy, which some interpreted as a shot across the bow for Hillary Clinton, who called Republicans the enemy at the last debate. It's a very strange spectacle, and I feel like sort of peak Biden excitement has started to lapse, and now there's a bit of, come on already. What are you waiting for? Are you going to do this or not? But it certainly seems like it's still, rolling around in his mind, whether he goes forth or not. I mean, I still think the rational decision is to not do it, but it's hard to say if he's functioning as a rational person right now.
Yes, I am liking the Joe Biden that I'm seeing, and I would say that I like. I mean, a lot of people have compared Paul Ryan and Joe Biden of late, and of course, those two debated the vice presidential debate in 2012. I think both of them are framing themselves as adults who don't need the job. And adults who are going to stand up for certain traditional values. And in the case of Biden, it would be obliquely scolding Hillary for saying that Republicans are the enemy. Maybe Biden's being opportunistic, but I liked it, and I think Paul Ryan's serving a similar function on the right.
Yeah, I find Biden's actions are more of a guy who desperately wants this job. This is not a guy saying, I can take it or leave it. Yeah, come to me if you need me. I'm going to hang out over here. This is the guy who is doing this an absurd level of machination because he can't let go of an obsession that he had for 40 years. And he's seeing his last chance slip away. So I feel he's got a big problem to overcome if he does actually do it, making a substantive case. Why not Hillary? Why me? Because, I mean, these differences, I'm going to treat Republicans more nicely than she is. That's not a huge, that's a bit of a stylistic difference. It's not a substantive difference. And it's not as if Hillary is saying she's never going to compromise with Republicans. In fact, she's openly saying she's going to compromise with Republicans. Her whole point against Bernie is that she's better for compromising than he is. So it strikes me as I don't see the lane that's open for him. Again, he might do it anyway and suffer the consequence.
Well, I think he's running. I mean, this is conventional wisdom now, but I mean, I agree he doesn't have a lane, but I think he's running as an insurance policy. I mean, if something happens to Hillary or she stumbles badly, he would then be in the race and he would be the presumptive nominee. I can see Barack Obama immediately supporting him. They're not going to nominate Bernie. So basically, Biden would be a heartbeat away from being the nominee, and that's not a horrible place to be.
If that is the game, does Biden have to announce at all in the short term? Or is it just wait until there is an actual discernible collapse on Hillary's part?
No, but I think in order to get on the ballots, he has to officially file, to get on ballots. Otherwise, he couldn't win the primary. I mean, I guess he could try to win a convention.
Well, it would be more along. I mean, you win a few primaries late. Back in the day, people used to jump in like in March, run in a few states, and then make their case at the convention. Would it be that sort of thing?
Right, but I mean, then trying to stop Bernie. I mean, it would be easier, presumably, for Biden to be in the race, to sort of, as opposed to, getting in later and trying to wrest the nomination from Bernie Sanders. I'm just, again, speculating. It's pure speculation here, of course. Well, everyone is speculating.
I don't want to run out of time, but we talk about the most important event of the week, and that is Canada. Were you watching the returns Monday night?
Not at all. But somebody, I'll just tell you about our cultural degradation. I've been told that I saw it somewhere, that the number one search was for Trudeau without a shirt on, right. or topless. That's the number one.
Of which there are many.
And so he's like Putin in that regard. The other thing I'll say is, I forget who, somebody noted, and I think it's true, that he does sort of look like a brunette Matthew McConaughey, for what that's worth. That's the extent of my knowledge about Trudeau.
Well, I think there is relevance here to our politics on two grounds. One, conservatives ran against him as an empty suit, intellectually dim, pretty boy, lightweight. They didn't quite directly attack him as a dynasty candidate because they actually want to separate him from his last name because Trudeau was a popular last name. They would just call him Justin. And say he was just not ready. But sort of underlying the whole argument is that he's only here because of his dad, and he's not actually up for the job. And so it was somewhat of a similar celebrity kind of attack that Republicans played on Obama in 2008, which didn't work. And it's a reminder that sometimes voters, like dynasties and like a brand name candidate that comes with.
It's the reason Hollywood keeps churning out horrible reboots and sequels.
Right. The other part of this race that has gotten less attention, I wrote about it last week. Larry Summers wrote about it yesterday, following my lead, I should point out, was the big turning point. That this is a race where in August, 2 months ago, the Liberal Party, Trudeau's party, was in third place. And the more leftist NDP was in first place. NDP was in the mid-30s, and the Conservatives, which have ruled for 9 years, were about 30. And Liberals were in the mid-20s. And at the end of August, Trudeau announces a Keynesian economic plan. Let's deliberately run deficits for at least 3 years in order to create jobs and lift us out of recession. And Canada, as it stands, has a balanced budget. I think they have a surplus right now, but they're in a bit of a recession. And not only did the Conservatives attack Trudeau on that as being fiscally irresponsible, but the NDP, traditionally, a real socialist party, a real leftist party, on the cusp of victory, they thought it made more sense to show they could be fiscally responsible. And they said therefore balanced budgets too. They wanted to raise taxes on the wealthy more than the Conservatives, of course. They wanted to have more government programs than the Conservatives, but they wanted to do it within the realm of a balanced budget. And that gave the Keynesian position all of Trudeau's to own. And he announced that at the end of August. He had an ad called Escalator where he's walking up an escalator that's going down. He's trying to go up and he's walking in place. And that's supposed to represent the Harper conservative economy. And he attacks both of them in that ad for proposing more cuts. That ad got 3 million YouTube views. No conservative or NDP ad got even 1 million. I mean, that's how popular that ad was. And then in the subsequent debate in mid-September, as Trudeau's laying this out and the NDP and the Conservatives are attacking him, the moderator in the middle of the debate says, we're watching a fascinating exchange between a newly centrist NDP and a deficit-favoring Liberal Party. And that did not help the NDP. That let the Liberals go up and up and up, and they went up and up into the polls throughout September and October until they shattered all the projections with an outright majority in Parliament on Election Day. And this is, I want to emphasize how incredibly unusual this is. Barack Obama in 2008 ran on cutting spending. Bill Clinton, he said he was going to put money into infrastructure projects, but he said he would do it while cutting the deficit in half. LBJ, when he announced the war on poverty, said he could do it while cutting federal spending and cutting the federal workforce. FDR ran on balanced budgets in 32 and 1936 after he didn't have balanced budgets in the middle of during his first term. He said, well, I'm going to do balanced budgets next time. Nobody runs on deficits. It never happens. And Miliband in the UK got knocked by the left saying, why are you putting more austerity? You want balanced budgets too. He was going to do it on a longer time frame than the Conservatives, but he still said he would do it because no one ever does it. It's very politically dangerous. But in Canada, it's not just that Canada's more left. I mean, the Conservatives have ruled there for 9 years. And also the newspaper editorials were for the Conservatives. But you're in a recession and you have a balanced budget. So you now have some sort of demonstrable evidence that, hey, this balanced budget is not making this economy work very well right now. Maybe this is the proper time to put our foot on the gas. And Trudeau sees the opportunity, and Mulcair of the NDP did not. So there are a lot of leftists in Canada who are mad because they feel Trudeau is sort of a corporate liberal. He's for the TPP trade agreement, or at least he's indicated that. He hasn't quite said it. He's sympathetic to the Keystone Pipeline, for example. But he outflanked the NDP on economics, and that's where he is today.
All right. I guess we've hit the high points and the low points.
I've not enthralled you with my Canadian political knowledge, Matt.
You have impressed me, as always, Bill. I think, look, without getting into it anymore, I mean, I think the real question is this cyclical? Is this, the Conservatives have been in power for a decade, or is this some sort of a trend? And that I think is probably the bigger question.
Well, 9 years is a lot for one party to be in power. And, I wonder if it would have been different if Harper, Cameron in the UK is stepping down. He already said, this is my second term and I'm not going to run the next time. Harper was really clinging. It's been Harper for 9 years straight. And, what if you pass the baton to somebody else? But as some people have said on Canadian Twitter, Harper literally made this party. This party did not exist before Harper. He pieced together other, fringe parties and fused them together. And he's not even stepping down now as the party leader. So he doesn't seem to have thought through how the party lives on beyond him. And both Democrats and Republicans here, have sort of similar issues. Who's the next generation after Hillary? We're going back a generation age-wise from Obama to Hillary, assuming she's the nominee, or even with Sanders or Clinton. I mean, they're all septuagenarians. Or maybe Hillary's not quite. And with the Republicans, they thought they had this great bench with all these governors, while these governors are tanking in the primary. So that's not as deep as bench as they thought it was. So, thinking about, who to pass the baton to is always a tricky subject. And I think the Conservatives in Canada didn't think through it at all.
Pre-order my book, Too Dumb to Fail. I'm just kidding. Bill, always a pleasure talking to you, and I always learn stuff and sparks ideas for columns and whatnot. I don't think I'll be delving into Canadian politics today, but always helps to know a little bit about it.
They're going to need your expertise now. They're flat on their back.
Yeah.
They need a dose of Lewis.
Great. It's good, too, that there's another sex symbol aside from me involved in politics now up in Canada. So that's good. So because, frankly, the attention and the fan letters are getting out of hand.
Always going to talk to you. Do pre-order Too Dumb to Fail.
Damn straight.
Only got a few months to go. We got a Republican debate next week.
Yes.
I think it's on Wednesday, so we might need to tape on Thursday to get the post game.
It's the book, Too Dumb to Fail, Matt K. Lewis. Get it Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, wherever fine books are sold. Check out my podcast.
The podcast,
Check out Bill Scher.
The guests you're getting on your podcast are incredible. You were getting some A-list guests on the podcast. That has become a necessary stopping point for Republican intelligentsia.
Well, and not just candidates either. I mean, it's not like the primaries playing out there. It's intellectual stuff, and not just Republican. I mean, we had Jane Ordlinger from National Review on yesterday to talk about his book "Children of Monsters" about the sons and daughters of dictators. I just talked to Homer Hickam, the author of Rocket Boys, about his new book "Bringing Albert Home," and I've got the Attorney General of West Virginia. Morrissey is coming on to talk about his battle with Obama's coal regulations. And we're going to talk to Craig Shirley about his new book about Ronald Reagan.
He's mad at Bill O'Reilly, O'Reilly's Reagan book.
Yeah, this is, let me plug it here. This is Craig Shirley's new book, Last Act. And he has been taking on Bill O'Reilly over O'Reilly's portrayal of Reagan in his latter years. So, yeah, check out the podcast, people. And here, rate it. You should do that. Rate and comment about the podcast. I'm told that drives up our ratings in iTunes. When people search for political podcasts, they might actually find us instead of Slate's Gabfest. So,
till next week, sir.
Thank you, Bill. And check out Bill Scher's Real Clear Politics articles every Monday at RCP, and your Politico magazine stuff as well. Let's spread the love around. All
Thank you for the promotional reciprocation. I should have a RCP piece Monday. I don't know what it's going to be about yet, though. I got that's my next task.
Indeed. Well, we will look forward to that. And thanks, guys, for tuning in.
Take care.
See ya.